Thank you very much. I will just open it quickly, kind of like to represent Pixamondo I'm working with. So I have a couple of cool shots from the latest work. Thank you very much. For those who don't know, Pixamondo is a leading visual effects and virtual production studio with facilities in North America and Europe. So for the past 20 years, we were like working together with our visual effects teams to experiment different tools and technologies, not just only like to innovate tools that meet the client needs, and working for the next generation of entertainment techniques. Mostly, and this is one of the reasons why you probably hear, is kind of like about the virtual production and how we work together with Amazon Web Services in order to integrate it with our next generation of production workflows and pipelines in the clouds, but also kind of like to optimize the remote collaboration support on real-time technologies, which allows us like to iterate quite quickly and review and feedback processes for virtual production. So in 2020, we launched our first virtual production stage in Toronto, followed by a second one, and now with the world's largest LED stage in the world here in Vancouver. So I have the honor to represent today Josh, who can't make it, unfortunately, so I have to change a little bit like the subject slightly. But anyhow, I'm Paolo Tamburino, an executive producer and production workflow architect. With almost 2 decades of experience in animation visual effects. And as you can guess, I'm a proud member of Pixamondo's virtual production family in Toronto, currently overseeing different virtual production and visual effects shows. Today, I'm honored to share with you how we work with AWS in order like to incorporate virtual production, for instance, on Star Trek Strange New Worlds and beyond. I personally joined Pixamondo 2020, halfway building like the first volume while most of the parts were shut down, suffered from lockdowns and hold productions, including like as well like stuck container ships and many other unknown variables at the time. So despite all these obstacles, we were more motivated than ever to accept this challenge and find ways to resume filmmaking. As you can imagine, that was quite challenging at the time. So we were looking at new techniques and technologies to return the creative control to the filmmakers and actors. So together with our top-notch teams and partnerships, we created multiple LED volumes, new departments, helped setting industry-leading standards and worked successfully on a few high-quality shows during the pandemic, in capacity as a single production studio, but as well as a multiple vendor key relationship. But before we jump into that, what is actual virtual production? Is it just another buzzword? Well, as most of you might know, virtual production is in fact not new. It has been out for quite a while and actually introduced along with visual effects. However, it became a hot topic again in the past 2.5 years, especially with the rise of the pandemic. So without going in depth of all the different fields of applications in history, I want to highlight a few of those techniques that fall under the umbrella of virtual production, which is the TACVIS, virtual location scouting, previs, and what I'm looking forward today to present to you and share with you is the virtual art department, also known as VAT, and in-camera visual effects, also known as ICVFX. So building an infrastructure for virtual production and Canada's first LED volume in the midst of the global pandemic was in dispute a challenge. In less than a half year, the logistics of both station operations must be planned and executed. So it was quite difficult, not only like to design those things while everything was locked down and to bring it in. It was kind of like thinking out of the box, out of our, I would say, comfortable visual effects areas by creating things after things have been filmed. In this case, we were like upfront, while scripts were developed, we had to build the first wall and finding a way to continue building those environments behind the scenes while the world was locked in. So we had like a limited amount of resources in Toronto, but as well global resources. So that said, as you know, visual effects might have some wiggle room about failures in the end. As we say, fix it in the post. ICVFX has zero tolerance. So coming to that, like our goal is like to create virtual production stages to capture in-camera visual effects by using Epic's Unreal Engine to create dynamic real-time environments and basically performing them on large LED volumes. And our primary goal is kind of like that our VAD artists globally can connect and work together. However, we have scenarios depending on the time frame, but as well about the scale that we might operate together and collaborate with other vendors, either from the studio side or ourselves. And in order to perform all that in a short amount of time, we have to quickly and securely get access to these assets from the creators to bring them on set, sync them down, and have them ready for production, as we have to be ready for the physical production. So this is kind of like where our first part in collaboration comes in place with AWS by using our virtual production pattern virtual machine running Perforce in Amazon's EC2 instances. So that said, the cloud is like a must these days, especially in operating virtual production, but not only like to streamline this unique process, but also to perform at any given time. Basically, in order like to perform at any capacity and custom tailored for the clients, you need to be able like to scale and have like, especially as a producer, a good understanding of the cost. So our goal was like to build a pipeline and tool sets which we can deploy without a lot of frictions across our facilities without interrupting our standard business about creating visual effects in those pipelines. So moving on, I want to show you a little bit more about that, what it means kind of like to have a year and working on 35 environments, which means like having a lot of people working around the world, but also moving a lot of data. So you might wonder kind of like how much does it take to create like 35 different worlds with multiple hotspots, multiple camera angles, and much, much more in just a little bit more than over 1 year. So first of all, reconnecting with the filmmakers, partnering up and being involved from day one. Secondly, global collaboration across all entities. And when I say all entities, that's not just like on the studio side, creating those worlds. It's also kind of like all traditional filmmakers from camera department, art department, screenwriters, and so on. So therefore, Pixamondo, we developed our own virtual art department along with other divisions. The virtual art department is basically the bridge between the traditional art department and virtual production. So our team is basically staffed on concept artists and generalists who are able like to support us to streamline the process and identifying like new ways about creating both worlds and merging them. In order to achieve that, especially during the pandemic, it's quite challenging because we had like restrictions in order like to bring people in for travel reasons as well as like work permissions. And also it allowed us like to find new talents on the other side. So bringing those people in, we could just really work like with any sort of talents we were not dreaming of. So starting with the VAT, we usually go with the concept and work closely with the filmmakers together to identify the script. So before like the first ideas are spin around, we try like to identify and consult kind of like how that can be accomplished. And that's kind of like usually like pushing the boundaries. At the moment, virtual production is quite often seen by the filmmakers as a big screen, as a, you know, home TV, just bigger, with not a lot of flexibility. Using AWS and other technologies allows us to bring actually those flexibilities back to the filmmakers. And to give you one of these examples, you see in the back an actress originally scripted in a way where she's appearing in an ice cage, finding like an alien cage, an object, which is supposed to be illuminated based on the cue while she's like singing to that. Traditionally, you would go there, build the environment, integrate it, and then they would just light it and film it, right? In our case, we came up with the idea and pitched it basically, how cool would it be like using those interactive hieroglyphs basically on the physical prop and replicate and integrate them to the wall. So basically imagine unlike that the actor is interacting with this alien egg while the entire wall, this actual virtual world, is corresponding and interacting with her cues. I will share with you because I'm not sure if everyone has seen Strange New Worlds Season 1 yet, so for those who haven't, close your eyes, otherwise enjoy this little snippet. So from the conceptual work, we move on kind of like by creating like quick iterations and skipping the traditional process and focusing back on the actual art making. So using virtual art department and cloud computing and cloud storage allows us kind of like to iterate quite quickly and assemble very fast like those environments by starting with proxy geometries and building and assemble those environments. That gives us like a quite early phase and idea for the filmmakers, especially the art department, if the physical set is working with the digital one. And we're able, even at the very early stage, about having like a gray shaded environment to define scale on set, but as well like to block in some lighting for the DPs. This allows us like to work quite quickly into the key art, which will be used later on as the guideline across all departments, including costume design, art department, DPs, and visual effects. Once that has been established and signed off, we move on with layout, where basically everything will be like placed in line and make sure kind of like that everything is set with the high-res assets. And to give you an idea, on Star Trek, for instance, we were the exclusive supplier for the digital environments, with an average of like 10 to 15 environments per season. So in the current production, we have another episodic series with over 100 environments and different scenarios in one season. So you can imagine that's kind of like a huge multiplier. So in order to get that accomplished, we need to scale up. And scale up means kind of like as well to open basically the door for other vendors. So this is kind of like a multi-vendor show. That said, you can imagine coming from visual effects, it's always challenging like to move one asset from one place to another. Just imagine that like with real-time technology in real time being on set. So not only like building those environments, but also syncing them down on set, have them ready for reviews, and finally for the actual shooting day. So in order like to be able like to accomplish that, we use additional storage and the speed and the performance of AWS, which allows us basically working with all these vendors across the world overseas by uploading, downloading quite consistently and super fast the data, which allows us a lot to address feedback on site and send it back to the actual vendors. In addition, we're like looking into alternative approaches for miniature builds, photogrammetry scanning. So all these techniques we can imagine like in the cloud, which exists now and in the future, will allow us like to unleash additional technologies and performances. Once everything has been built, we go in the next phase, which is look development and lighting, which is all about performance and making sure that everything looks as defined in the style guide at the beginning and the approved key art. So that brings me in the part as a producer I'm especially proud of, what I would call Review 2.0. So besides of traditional CineSyncs, Shotgun, and other review tools, we meet up quite early, especially during the pandemic, doing Zoom reviews. We use or tend to use kind of like Oculus and other sort of like tools to review those environments at a quite early stage. But in the end, where you really want to feel it is kind of like on set within the volume, because it's kind of like feeling the dimensions. So at the very early stage, you're able like to bring back all these controls to the filmmakers and being part of this process. In order to accomplish that, again, you have to move a lot of data from A to B, while our team still consistently like works on those environments in real time behind the scenes. To give you an example, so it's not just like you build it, it also allows you like to block in light, to take actually blocks and animatics, which helps like already like at the very early stage like to create storyboards and animatics to define the story if things are working out and like sharing it with other departments. That said, therefore we use Amazon's S3 servers, basically their storage, to allow us like to transport the assets from one place to the other. And one of the core principles, and again, what you see right now on this slide is basically what we work on the studio side. Where it becomes crucial, and one of the key differences between visual effects and VP is where we work on site, where we do reviews, and what we call later on the blend, which is basically the pre-light, literally before we shoot, to make sure that the physical set is in line with the digital one. And the beauty about that is, if you think about traditional visual effects to replace something, it takes minutes, it takes hours to render. Well, in our scenario, we're able to review on one dedicated day with the associated DPs and directors, which are not usually available. They usually get blocked for 2 weeks and literally assigned before we start filming, to review multiple environments and swap between them. And when I say swap, it could be anything from one environment with different lighting scenarios, having control about dynamic lights, over swapping complete different environments while the physical set, as you can see around there, is still being built. And this gives you like so much more control, where you can dynamically, but most important, interactively work with your client, and not like just in 2D feeling. It's really like about being in the volume and have a good understanding how the light, how the dimensions and everything operates with your physical set and eventually the actors. That said, that brings a lot kind of like about performance and analytics. Both are keys. The performance is kind of like, as you can imagine, operating a stage. It's different than just creating like shots. And analytics are quite important, like to understand basically where you might have lost some performance and where you need to improve before you go and set. Because one of the key parts, and again the difference to visual effects, is that there is no tolerance for mistakes. You have to be ready on the physical production day. There's no way that you can delay it. So everything which helps us, like with cloud technology and machine learning and smart tools we created so far, allows us like to understand what's happening and trying to predict and avoid any sort of mistakes before we start rolling the camera. So consistency and reliability, that are, in my opinion, as a producer, the most valuable parts that you need to assure to your clients. Everything else before can be fixed, everything else can be later be fixed. But again, you have to be ready on the day where you film. And that said, I want to give you one more behind the scenes about what we call the blend day and the final shoot. Thank you very much. So to quickly recap, what have we accomplished so far with cloud technology and the support of AWS? It's basically going fully remote into virtual production and building an infrastructure during a pandemic. Strengthen the global collaboration across our artists and the facilities. Increase the number of environments significantly. We are able to deploy basically our pipelines and workflows across all facilities without interrupting the organization with the traditional VisualFX workflows. And we developed interactive reviews, which are greatly appreciated by our clients, which helps as well about improving the collaborative and faster iterative feedback. And finally, we added a multi-vendor show support. So this is basically the first step where Pixamondo and the journey with AWS goes. And of course, we have more what we would like to see in the future. And to give you just a quick indication what we love to see in a year or in the next 2 years would be kind of to help further to define the industry standard, which is terminology and workflows, that we speak the same language. Continue to expand the build of dynamic environments, getting bigger and wider. Streamline workflows for multi-vendor shows, machine learning to create awesome stuff and pushing the boundaries and remove some of the roadblockers clients are looking for, compute on demand to ensure that we have always full throttle when it's needed, put everything in the cloud, work wherever we want, and tools for analytics, especially for people like me as a producer, having a good understanding about the costs and forecasting what's required for the next big show. Well, that's basically it. Time flew by. I hope that you could take some interesting information. Thanks AWS for this great opportunity. Thanks everyone. And if you have questions, I will be out.